Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the ISBEO SafetyNet webinar series presented today by Polaris Aero, covering SMS for charters, business impacts that cascade from safety. I'm Catherine Hilst, the voice in the background. I am the ISBEO Operations Manager, and I just want to go through a couple of housekeeping items. The attendees are on mute, so you're on mute just due to the number of attendees, but for your questions, for the question and answer section, we would love to have you post those in the questions box. On your control panel, you have a drop down on the bottom of your control panel for GoToWebinar, and you can type in your questions there. Please feel free to type them in as you think of them, and we'll look at those after the presentation. I'm excited to present this webinar by Polaris Aero. Today, the topic is about how we focused maybe too often on the tactical aspect of managing a safety program and become hyper vigilant on the standards and the SPIs from the safety perspective. Well, that's important. This webinar is focusing on the additional benefits that cascade from a sound safety program as it relates to your culture, your partners, and customers alike, particularly with a charter or management company. Having a strong safety program has direct benefits, but it's important that we increase our awareness of the additional benefits it can bring. Steve Bruneau of Polaris Aero is our host, and he is the Vice President of Aviation Services at Polaris Aero, is responsible for expanding the company's suite of safety management solutions. Prior to joining Polaris, he was the Chief Operating Officer of Pulsar Informatics, delivering fatigue risk management systems to aviation organizations of all FAR types, including their maintenance and ground handling departments. Steve has over 25 years of process consulting experience helping organizations meet regulatory requirements or achieve new levels of performance. He has a BS in mechanical engineering, an MS in aerospace engineering, and has been a leader of 3 successful startup companies prior to joining Polaris. Also with us today is Jim Garrett, the Director of Safety at DaVinci Jet, a charter and management company based in Charlotte, North Carolina. Jim began his aviation career in 2001 with Mesa Airlines as a graduate of their pilot development program. He left the airlines in 2004 to pursue a career in general aviation and has since accumulated over 5,000 hours of flight experience. He spent the majority of the last 16 years in operations management and instruction in both commercial and corporate environments. In 2013, he brought his accumulated experience to DaVinci Jets to serve as an aircraft captain, as well as beginning his tenure there with DaVinci Jets. And Larry Solis is the Director of Safety and Continuous Improvement at Omni Air Transport, a Part 135 charter operator based in Oklahoma. I just made you a helicopter person. A charter operator in Oklahoma. Through his career, Larry has run the SMS of a large regional Part 121 airline, overhauled CAS and maintenance safety investigation programs, and spoken at industry conferences on topics such as just culture and the scalability of SMS. Steve, Jim, and Larry, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to hand this over to Steve.
All right. Well, thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody, wherever you are. And special thanks to Larry and Jim for joining me today. I'm excited to talk about this because one of the challenges, oftentimes, that many who want to put a safety program into play at their flight department come across is getting that management buy-in and getting people to think about the safety program in a broader context. So what we want to spend our time today is looking at that extra stuff, right? What are the impacts that a good safety program has on the business from a charter standpoint? And of course, we'll be talking about safety-related things, but what does that mean? Not just at the safety level, but at the business level. So we're really excited, and with Larry and Jim weighing in on today's topics, you get the best of the best. 2 outstanding organizations walking the talk every day. So what does today's agenda looks like? We want to just kind of baseline the 4 pillars of SMS. Not to turn this into an SMS educational course, but to use that as a foundation of the main aspects of SMS, and you're going to hear those main aspects through our talking points today. And I think that's important because, again, most of the time when we think about SMS, we think about those 4 pillars in a very specific safety kind of way, but you're going to hear a lot of the same themes propagated throughout the answers in today's discussion. Then we're going to get over and really talk more about the broadening of who and how SMS impacts the greater ecosystem of your business, right? Too often, I think we think about the SMS as just something for our flight department or our organization, but in reality, your safety program touches a lot more than that. So we want to cover that. And we're going to look at the specifics of what that means in a couple different contexts. The first one will be looking at it from the standpoint of the people aspects of the ecosystem. So the culture, engagement, onboarding types of impacts. Then we're going to look at it from the standpoint of the business process side of things. So things like continuous improvement, business continuity, knowledge management. And then we're going to look at technology, the role it plays, challenges, trade-offs, and the way in which it's utilized to help comply with standards. And then we'll wrap up with a broader business impacts, like how does safety impact or contribute to the branding of your organization? How is it used in promotional aspects? How does it affect financial benefits in the organization? And ultimately, again, the direct relationships you have with your partners and supply chain. So you can see there's a lot of tentacles, if you will, that go out from what we're going to talk about today, and that's what we hope you come away with from some of the great input you're going to hear from Jim and Larry. And then we'll wrap up with some parting thoughts. So hopefully through today's discussion, and this will be more of a discussion, and there will be a slide presentation that frames the discussion, but we hope to have a lot of back and forth, and you'll hear a lot of good examples throughout. So let's talk a little bit about the 4 pillars. Again, not to get into an educational session on this, but just to kind of recap it again as a foundation for a lot about what you're going to hear. So, and this is the FAA graphic, which I really like because I think it takes the core 3 pillars and then wraps it with the promotion of all of them, which is kind of, I think, a nice graphic. But it does start with your policies, right? This is your commitment to safety. It's going to identify the safety objectives of your organization and the accountabilities and who's responsible for what. So it really just sets the tone, and that's important to have, right? Next pillar is your safety risk management, right? This is where you can identify your hazards, analyze them, assess them, understand what the root causes are, and put in place your risk controls to help control the safety risk. Third pillar is your safety assurance pillar. Right here, we're talking about not just straight up audits, but looking at the effectiveness of your risk controls, making sure the organization is meeting or exceeding the objectives that have been set. And again, monitoring this on an ongoing basis. This is not something you just do once a year. This is something you should be doing all the time. And then last but not least is promotion, which, as I said from the graphic, I think is nice because talk about promotion in all 3 of the other pillars. But we're going to talk about all 4 of these pillars, again, in a broader context throughout today's discussion. So again, as you think about 4 pillars in most presentations, we tend to get just bogged down into the safety details, but hopefully today you can take it from here and we can expand outward. So the first thing we want to talk about is just talk about that expanding outward and look at the total ecosystem that's impacted by a safety program. So when you think about it, again, most of the time we typically think about how is it going to affect our employees. And then we start talking about safety managers and how it helps their day and helps them manage the program. But we need to think about it beyond that, right? How do customers and passengers see our organizations through the lens of safety? How does that impact our relationships with vendors? Who do we choose as vendors as a result? The leadership of our organization, to the extent we're going to hear a lot about enterprise risk management today, leadership should be aware of the safety aspects of that and tout that as much as possible as they lead your organization forward. Contractors, people that you bring on in temporary basis, whether it's contract pilots, flight attendants, maintenance techs, what have you, they need to plug and play, right? They need to be on point just as any other employee would be. And then ownership, right? Sometimes your leadership and your ownership, depending on your size, aren't the same people. So they need to be patched into how the safety is evolving and functioning within an organization. And then last but not least, the public as a whole, right? There's an expectation in public that our airplanes stay in the skies and they land at the airports, and that's the way everything goes nice and smooth, right? So there's an expectation there that we need to be able to talk to and address. And then as we were preparing for our discussion today, Larry brought up a good point that, when you look at all the different nodes around this ecosystem, in effect, while they all have their own sort of benefits and impacts, the reality of it is they're all connected, right? There's a lot of interplay between a lot of these things that in effect sort of broaden the scope and influence that a good safety program has. So again, I think in the answers and discussion points of today, I think you're going to see a lot of that, and hopefully it's a good takeaway for everyone on the call. So in order to get right into the discussion, what we want to start focusing on is the people aspects. How does this affect, from an organizational standpoint, the culture, the engagement, and the onboarding of your team? So the way we're going to do this is we're going to basically bounce through each of those different sections and have Larry and Jim weigh in on each one. So we're going to start with the cultural aspect. So Larry, if you could touch on the cultural aspects of safety at Omni.
Yeah, absolutely. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. So on the culture side here at Omni, our safety culture and our company culture are kind of inextricably linked together, right? So when we're going through and we're evaluating candidates and we're looking at whether or not to bring somebody on board, if we're hiring for one, we're hiring for both. So all of our management, our director level folks and folks that do the majority of our hiring here are aware of what we're looking for from a safety standpoint, but it's not a separate entity. We're not looking at it separately from our company culture. So if you fit in one, you usually fit into both, because we're hiring for very specific cultural things that we kind of hold near and dear to our hearts, as far as the service we provide to our clients and the different things that go into running a successful operation. And we kind of look at safety as an additional piece of that just kind of flows naturally versus being something completely separate that we're asking specific pointed safety questions. We kind of know that if they fit into our cultural box from a company standpoint, that they will also fit into our culture standpoint, into our culture, safety culture. So it's a pretty seamless thing for us, and it really helps us vet employees in a way that isn't, again, that pointed kind of tell me about a time where you did something unsafe or you saw something unsafe. We don't have to ask those kinds of questions because the rest of the questions we're asking kind of stuff out that information, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Interesting. And how about you, Jim?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you all and to participate this morning. Well, good morning from the East Coast, at least. Welcome. Definitely for Da Vinci Jets, when we start to take a look at culture, I like to go for the definition that says it's the story of the company as told by the behaviors of its employees. And so very much in the same vein, we are looking for the employees that fit the culture as opposed to trying to mold them into something that they aren't. And their behavior reflects the company from the get-go. Certainly exposure to that culture then reinforces safety on that aspect with regards to that particular core value within our culture. But as we work to fit the new people in, it's not a whole lot of work. It's done on the front end, much the same.
Right. Awesome. And then from a standpoint of engagement, oftentimes, people think of safety as that extra thing they got to do. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that in each of what your responses are here.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the Omni side, we talk a lot about transparency. We're very transparent. I was actually just talking with our DO a few days ago, and he mentioned to a new hire class that you don't hear, oh, I can't really talk about that around here very often. There are obviously things that we don't and can't discuss, but when it comes to safety initiatives within the organization and remaining engaged with the employees, we're pretty much an open book. We still maintain confidentiality for the individuals that submitted reports. And if there are things that are sensitive, we obviously, we'll redact those. But for the most part, we have monthly company safety meetings where we talk to the entire company. And we let them know, here are the safety reports we received. Here are the mitigation steps that we're undergoing currently, or kind of where we're at with these different initiatives. And we really try to keep it open and accessible and visible to the whole staff versus kind of keeping safety behind that shroud. Don't pay any attention to the man behind the curtain type stuff. It's done wonders for us because it doesn't feel like safety is kind of this. Again, the man behind the curtain, right? It's all out in the open, and we're discussing it again with the appropriate, controls around confidentiality and sensitive materials and things like that. But for the most part, our staff understands that all of leadership is accessible, visible. We're around. You can talk to us about anything safety related, and also that you're going to get. We're pretty straight shooters around here. You're gonna know what's going on in the organization, and we're not prone to hiding it from you just because you're not a leadership employee or something like that. We try to keep as much out in the open as we can.
Excellent. Jim?
So on the front end, as we're engaging somebody, a new hire to bring in, some of these aspects are promotional for the hire. ASAP and just the idea of having a safety management system are new ideas to some new hires coming from a corporate culture that was smaller, where safety wasn't fully developed. As they come in, if they've already got some experience or where they don't have experience with safety, the training that's given, that's imparted on them for the use of those systems, and where they can take their ideas, their thoughts, their concerns, then helps to develop that continued growth in the confidence in the system. Finally, on the back end of that, of course, is the lessons learned, and that bringing those safety reports, how it goes and is digested through the system, and what the mitigations are that come out the back end for their benefit, for the whole group's benefit, those are all some of the high points of safety at Da Vinci Jets, and where the individual employees have a chance to connect and then see the results of how they contributed.
Yeah, that's oftentimes I'll hear that, at different organizations they'll say, well, I submitted a safety report, but it's sort of the black hole of death, right? They never see what happens. They don't see kind of the output. Nothing ever changes and so forth. So both of the things that you guys are mentioning, the transparency of information, the closing the loop of what was reported, that visibility gives people the confidence that, hey, this organization is going to listen to what I'm saying, and therefore they're going to participate at different levels. So I think that's kind of the main takeaway that I come away with. How about onboarding?
Yeah, I'll
go ahead.
that real quick. That I think that sometimes it's prudent to also and to kind of keep the engagement up. It's prudent to include these employees in the mitigation effort, right? You talk about the kind of standard iceberg of ignorance type stuff, and we try to engage employees, frontline employees that are using the policies and procedures that we're moving around and changing each and every day, to try and get their feedback. We want to hand them something that's workable, right? If you're fixing safety problems but creating efficiency problems, you're not really kind of nailing it. So as much as we can, we want to talk to pilots, we want to talk to mechanics and schedulers and dispatchers, and really kind of get their input on the way forward, so that when we hand them a solution, it's workable and it's safer.
Right, which I think touches on the fact that safety is woven into all the things we do, right? And the efficiency connection that you talked about. Yeah, you can do something super safe, but the most safest airline in the world is one that doesn't fly. But then you don't have an airline, right? So anyway, Jim, I'm sorry, Larry, if you could pick up on the onboarding side, how do you guys leverage your safety program when it comes to the onboarding aspects?
So our safety training is day one, module one, and that's intentional on our part. I'm the first or second person they meet, depending on who they interviewed with. So our SMS gives us a framework with which to kind of kick off a new employee's time here at Omni. And really to discuss and work through all of the cultural safety things again right up front. Deluge of information over their in-dock week or however long that might be, but to be able to meet them first and really kind of set the tone for what the company is all about, and also the expectations of the company and safety, different safety aspects, is pretty important. And I think we'll continue doing that forever. It works out really, really well, and it really kind of frames the rest of their in-dock week in terms of how they look at different material that is being presented to them. They kind of have that safety, it has that safety slant to it because they discussed it up front, and they can kind of tie it back to what they learned from me on day one. It's a long day one, for them and for me, but it's absolutely worth it. And it really kind of sets the tone for not only their whole week, but really their time, here at Omni.
Right. That's awesome. Jim, how about you?
Certainly similar in the fact that, safety is presented right up front. And I like to emphasize that when we're going through that onboarding, that it's, because safety is a core value. We didn't hire you to teach you safety. We didn't hire you to teach you to put your seatbelt on when you get in your car. We hired you because we see that in you. And so the training is a reinforcement of that. It's opening the door for the opportunity for them to contribute and to immediately become a part of the entire team, the entire company, and to have an effect there, whether it's a pilot, or a mechanic, where they have definitely some frontline efforts that they can contribute to, but right on through to schedulers and finance personnel to know that they play a part when it comes to safety throughout the company. And it's always interesting to see when they get that feedback that they made a contribution, and then it goes back up, kind of back across that chain for the flight crews or for the maintenance personnel to say, hey, that was great because that affected me too.
Right. Yeah, I love all the two things you guys just both mentioned. I mean, setting expectations from the jump for a new hire just really puts the foundation in place, right? I mean, there's no excuses. Like, this is the first thing you learn, so everything else comes from that. I think that's just a great message and can build upon, as you guys both pointed out. So thanks. Let's talk a little bit about the processes, right? So, people, obviously, we want good people who are well trained, but I think, Larry, you touched on in a minute about, it's one thing to do something safer, but if it kills your efficiency, you need to kind of work on trying to find some happy medium there. So let's talk a little about the process side of things. I think we start again. Larry, if you could start with your thoughts on just generally the continuous improvement aspect of safety.
Yeah, for sure. So this is continuous improvement is part of my job, both as a safety professional and outside of that. I have some responsibilities around our company's, kind of growth initiatives and things like that. And SMS, IEP, they're used for safety. They're primarily safety tools, but they can and do identify continuous improvement opportunities. I'll give you an example. We actually switched to Polaris from a system that we were in prior because of a safety culture survey that we did. And that safety culture survey indicated that maybe there was some difficulty in the old system with how to report, or that it was cumbersome for individuals. And because of that, we decided to make, to undergo continuous improvement efforts to go to a more robust technology than we had before. Those different things happen day in, day out. We may source new vendors because of a safety report that comes through that we had difficulty with a vendor. It might not be safety related. Might be something that is more on the quality side or on the kind of financial risk side. And we've started lots of projects and modernized different things inside Omni because of discoveries made through our SMS and IEP. And it's not always a one-for-one thing. Sometimes it's a knock-on effect where you start an investigation and you start it as a safety investigation, but you kind of uncover, and you peel back those layers of the onion and you start seeing the different things that maybe didn't lead directly to an event or a concern, but led, are kind of maybe 3-4 steps removed. And you think, man, if we do this a little bit differently in the background, then I think, the knock-on effect is that this problem gets solved. So it's an invaluable tool for this for many reasons. And I know we touch on this throughout the rest of the presentation. So I won't spoil it for everybody as we go through, but it's a really key part of how an SMS can function at any operator in a way that everybody has stake in the game, from finance to marketing and kind of all over.
Right. And I think, again, for those safety officers on the call who maybe struggle with management support, I think this point that Larry's making here is important, right? Because most business leaders immediately think of business process improvement, right? And they think of it in a lot of different ways, but safety might always be connected. So when you can explain how it's just another form of continuous improvement, and that it's woven into the operational procedures of your organization, then maybe there can be the light bulb that triggers the more support that you might be needing or need to get over the hump. So anyway, good point, Larry. How about on the Da Vinci side, Jim?
Certainly the internal evaluation does give an opportunity for everyone to have say and that community buy-in. Larger management of change issues get all kinds of little bits and pieces that can be improved. We added more recently a division in between two divisions. So when it came to how we were running our maintenance, we actually put a whole maintenance division in between the two, and that created an opportunity for some of those ripples to come out into the other departments. While most of it worked just the way we planned, some of the parts showed up with some unintended consequences. And so the safety system in and of itself gave an opportunity for that voice. And sometimes it gives an opportunity for the input to say, hey, at this other organization, here's what I saw. And we can actually hit the pause button on some of those changes and then reach back out to our partners in the industry and work to successfully correct those changes or make it even better. Sometimes we can do that on the front end through that internal evaluation. The question gets asked, and then sometimes it's that exposure on the back end. So the benefits from running that continuous improvement and the internal evaluations, it's really pretty priceless, because from what I've seen, is it reduces the amount of time necessary to make effective change because of the ability to quickly communicate those ideas and to pull departments back together to say, hey, here's a spot where it created a hiccup. Where does that really have an effect? Maybe it's just a communication piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and your point about outside sources is key too, because sometimes when we're all just working in our own little silo, we see the world through filtered glasses. But when someone's on the outside looking in, they don't have the same glasses on, and they may see something that the internal folks don't as well. So it's another perspective of making sure you're getting good input to work on.
Yeah, and Jim, you brought up really interesting that I kind of wanted to discuss a little further if we could. You talked a little bit about those outside sources and how it kind of the same thing that we had both mentioned, where it just kind of drives some of those continuous improvement efforts. I think it's important to know for folks that are either early in their SMS journey or haven't started it at all yet, that especially for smaller operators, we're not a huge operator. We don't have a Six Sigma black belt and just hanging around doing work around here, right? So we don't have a full-on QMS. We're kind of we're doing it like everybody else is, right? Where we don't necessarily have those resources handy. And SMS is not a replacement for a full-blown QMS necessarily, but it is a really good framework with which to document some of the efforts that you're undergoing, and with which to, and this is the part that kind of keyed me in to talk about it, is to move projects forward. You can use SMS in a business sense to document your efforts, right? The same things that go into managing quality issues or managing production issues go into managing safety issues. The two are the same basic principles, and SMS gives you the framework to use for that without necessarily having a Six Sigma black belt that's just kind of hanging around, because I don't think any of us have that necessarily, unless we happen to have that skill set kind of adjacent to what we do on a day-to-day basis.
Right. Agreed.
Exactly, and it kind of leads right into the business continuity side, right? In our world, there's constant change, right? Certainly in the last handful of years with COVID, on the one hand, it slowed everything down very quickly, and then on the other hand, it ramped everything up very quickly. And then, of course, now as we kind of get back into somewhat of a normal routine, we've got other headwinds that we have to address. So maybe if you guys could touch a little bit on the business continuity of how SMS helps you maintain a high quality operation through all that change. Larry?
So, yeah, COVID was a wonderful stress test for safety management, right? Because it happened fast, it was widespread, we didn't know what was coming next, and you don't always get to stress test your SMS in that fashion. Obviously, it was an awful thing to have happen, but having an SMS really helped as you figured out how to keep the business running through all of this, right? I wasn't at Omni during the onset of COVID. I was still at the airline. But one of the things that our SMS allowed us to do was all sit down and you're troubleshooting live, right? You're going through and you're using the principles that we discussed just a minute ago. You're using those SMS principles to really figure out not only how to keep, everybody safe, which was obviously the number one most important thing. How do we keep our employees, our passengers, all of these folks safe? But you're also figuring out how to continue to run the business on top of that. And it was, I'm sure for everybody on the call to some degree or another, it was a plate spinning exercise. But having SMS and having the framework built already was tremendously helpful in that effort, because it gave us a template to work with that allowed us to work through that. On the slide here, it talks a little bit about the documentation that SMS requires, right? And it doesn't necessarily need to be this big fancy production of a process, but the documentation requires us to kind of go through those steps, and it leads to information being put in control manuals, right? That's kind of the name of the game. We take the information that might be in my brain or Jim's brain or anybody else's, and we're putting it on paper. We're building a process around that, and it's sometimes for some people in the operation, that's the part that they hate, right? They don't another policy, another procedure, but it's necessary from a business continuity standpoint, so that if something happens, somebody else can kind of pick up the ball and run with it. If whether that's I always tell people, if your 5 most tenured employees split the Powerball, split $1 billion Powerball, and they come to you and say, sorry guys, it's been great, but I just won $200 million. What are you going to do? How are you going to continue to run your business, especially for smaller operators? How do you continue how do you not backslide as much as you may in that scenario, because you haven't necessarily taken those documentation steps? SMS kind of solves that problem naturally. And once you become accustomed to applying those principles and documenting those norms and that kind of tribal knowledge that might be in those 5 people's heads, and you wish them well when they split the Powerball, instead of kind of silently having your hair catch on fire. I don't have that problem, but having your hair catch on fire and and freaking out when something like that happens. It's a really settling thought, and it's something that SMS kind of drives you toward, which is something that I think leadership really appreciates about the SMS, is that it has us put those things somewhere where, if that happens, somebody can pick up the ball and run with it, and you still, kind of regress a little bit, but you don't regress nearly as much as you could otherwise when that person has it all right kind of in their head.
Exactly. And how about you, Jim, at Da Vinci? How do you guys address it?
For sure, definitely with the idea of tribal knowledge and the whole point of management of change when it comes to that portion of the SMS. Sometimes it's the voice of reason, and somebody's got a really great idea, and you realize, hey, we had this idea before, and it didn't work, and it caused these issues. And while it seems really great, or a great moneymaker, or a great safety improvement, here's where all of the deficiencies were. Or yes, we did it before, what's different? So how can we make your great idea different or improve on it? Because that's part of it. And so what went into it in the past? What are we looking at now? And what does it look like in the future? We have a committee that will throw this stuff in front of, and while most of the time they let management do what they were hired to do, right? That the managers are hired because they're smart. That's what they're hired to do, that job. And for the most part, they've got their finger on the pulse for that portion of the operation. But every once in a while, somebody in that committee says, "Hey, didn't we do this in the past?" And then we can start to drill into those reports. What did we need to do, or how do we need to look for it in those reports? Where did we find that issue? And we'll assign that task out to somebody, and they'll bring that back to that manager and say, "This was the recommendation from the committee back then. This is how it went through the system back then. There's your historical data. What are we looking at now?" And definitely that, I don't want to use the word forced, but that inclination to document and to have historical processes in there, and then to move forward with good planning and good process management, good documentation, good training. All of that is enhanced through a well-established safety management system, for sure.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, just as you talk about being able to reference decisions and trade-offs that were done in the past and leverage that into future-looking questions or opportunities, that's a knowledge management kind of endeavor that a business needs to have at its fingertips. And then, like Larry mentioned a minute ago, when you lose critical people and your organization steps back, ideally you don't step back too far, and ideally you don't step back for too long. So knowledge management kind of plays into that as well. So let's talk again from a business standpoint, an SMS and its impact on knowledge management. Larry, why don't you pick it up from there?
Sure. I had mentioned earlier the kind of transparency that we value around here. And, SMS principles also drive us to socializing information, right? If you look at Part 5 or really any of the standards that we all subscribe to, it all talks about promoting safety and how do you communicate safety information. Every standard out there has that one question or those two questions about how do you get safety information to the organization. And again, it makes it easier to kind of pull back that curtain and talk about safety information, socialize that safety information, and discuss it. Which knowledge management and business continuity to me are kind of they're very closely linked. But when I think knowledge management, I think about getting information out to everybody. Steve mentioned earlier that a lot of people think that you submit a safety report and it goes into a black hole. This kind of forces us out of that mentality. We want our team to know the information. We want them to know what's going on behind the curtain. So it informs us to socialize the information in a way that is easy and is as widespread as possible. And it's really, really helpful in driving that information out of the front line.
Excellent. How about
definitely very effective at moving it from the tribal to to the documented knowledge and with policies and procedures in place. Absolutely. And this is just a little bit more of a broadening out on the historical side of things. A previous system that we used, the SMS, it was difficult to mine any data out of it. The searches were limited, and a lot of times when we started to do research, you start with a Google search and then you're starting to work into directed databases. FAA and NTSB are just two very broad examples. But then you get into how does your vendor product work and how well are you capable of utilizing that for managing that historical knowledge and being able to point it into a direction where it gives you forward-looking data and producing some data protocols as the end user, as the director or the safety manager. How do we utilize that that product to point us toward greater knowledge in the future. So having the right, certainly, and we'll expand on this, I don't want to jump too forward in the slides, but definitely having the right product in place is important to get you through all of these, all of that data management and making sure that your people are informed.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really a failure of the safety program if the same safety mishaps continue to happen over and over again, and turns out the organization's learned that lessons 3 times over in the past, right? So to the extent you can propagate that knowledge forward and see the minimization of these things reoccurring in the future, that's the objective, right? That's what we want to accomplish. Let's talk a little bit about technology, which leads right into that. What is the role in technology helping you to do this stuff? What are some of the challenges and trade-offs? And then, with respect to standards, how does it help you comply? Jim, we'll start with you this time.
So for us, we changed systems about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago now. And as we did, we took a really hard look at configuration versus customization. How does that product, how does that technology fit with the organization? What do we need to use it for? And one area that we looked at was reports. Another was fitting audit forms into an automated system that reflects and replicates what we've been using. How did it fit our manual and processes currently? And looking forward to what we were going to be using. And it was a pretty hefty change for us, and it's worked well. And there's still some things to work into the system, but definitely when it came to safety resource management or safety risk management and safety assurance, we've definitely upped our game for sure by looking for the right configuration and what we needed to be able to customize within that particular configuration of the system.
Excellent. Larry?
So to hit on something Jim was just discussing, I like to tell people that SMS is simple enough that you can do it on the back of a napkin. It doesn't mean that you should. So the customization and making sure that you have the right product, whatever that right product is, right? There are different ways for different operators to do things. I encourage everybody to use something, right? But the principles of SMS, that's where that customization comes into play, and that configuration and making sure that it works both with kind of what you're trying to do with SMS, but also works for your organization. It's very important. For us, we're actually working through a process of integrating our technology, right? And trying to move our technology to the point where it's kind of a seamless transfer of information, both between the technologies, within the technology suite that we employ, and also with our employees. So we're trying to get to that kind of that one-stop shopping type idea where our pilots only have to go 1 or 2 places max to get information. That's kind of where we want to get to, and that's kind of why I say you can do it on a napkin, but you shouldn't, because this is kind of the way forward, is making it easier to digest that information and making it so that information is in 1 or 2 places versus kind of the disparate 7 or 8 it might be in kind of naturally, right? You get your NOTAMs from here, you get this from here, you get this from here, and putting it into one system. And so our scheduling SMS system, our M&E, our Office 365 suite, and just trying to get all of those into the same ecosystem has been something that we're working on currently and trying to expand upon to help us transfer information, again, between the technologies and also to our employees. It's very important.
Right, technology should do the heavy lifting for folks. Right, the last thing you need is a bunch of technology silos that people are fat fingering information from one to another, or they're just confused. Right, you have to go to one of a multitude of systems to find what you're looking for, and then you got to remember your password, and then you hit a password reset, and by the time you actually get to the data, you forgot what you were looking for. So,
and you never want You never want to hear somebody say, where do I go to file a safety report? That means that your technology is too confusing.
Exactly. Because the minute it's too confusing or it takes too long, they're not going to report. And then that, of course, is the death knell to a good safety program. So as you guys have both talked about transitioning to new systems, and as you continue to expand the systems that you have and the way in which they're integrated to other things, maybe if you could touch on the challenges and trade-offs that you've experienced. Start with you, Jim.
Well, Larry, it's interesting that you mentioned the back of the napkin, because that was one of the trade-offs that or challenges that we were experiencing as we continued to grow, was that we started working backwards, and the system that we were using was forcing us to go back to paper, or actually to work toward paper, as some of the ideas that had continued to broaden out about all that we could capture with safety. The audit forms and some of the ways that we did evaluations, internal evaluations, weren't fitting into that old system. And so as we made the switch, and we did come over to Polaris and Focus as well, we were able to get more consistency, and we were able to reduce that time that it took to access the system, make an entry into SMS. The one thing that always gets me is when someone sends me a text with a message and a photo attached, and it's a safety entry. So it's like, wow, our technology is just that simple. You open the app, you click that you want to send it, send that information in, you type that information into the box, and you click on the spot where you take a picture. So really, that was a trade-off of switching up, and of course, as we adopt a new technology, somebody had to champion it and help make it become second nature for those folks. Some of the parts were really easy. Some of the parts are still a little bit difficult. Some of them are the same challenges, and then of course, as we worked into some of the new audit forms, building that out within our system, that was a bit of a challenge to help champion for us. And I know our flight risk was a big change, but there were some really great add-ins in there as well that helped to promote the use of that flight risk. And we've gotten some great feedback in the systems and made some pretty effective configurations and modifications within the system to be able to fit those requests from within our own company and our own resources.
And success begets more usage ultimately, right?
It does, yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. How about you, Larry?
And I think that this is not unique to any specific system necessarily, but just consistent use, right, across the organization. How do you get people to consistently get into your SMS system and do something, even if it's just to log in, right? Not here, but in a previous job, we'd have people that would call and say, hey, my password for the safety reporting system that we used expired 6 months ago, because they just don't log into it, right? It's not part of their day-to-day. So some of the things that we've done to kind of work through that, and this is, again, it's not a unique challenge to us, I'm sure, but is to take information that we are regularly communicating and put it in through the SMS. So the best example that I can give you is I mentioned the company safety meetings monthly. We have pilots that are flying. So what we do is we record the company safety meeting, and then we have a requirement that everybody acknowledge that they either attended or watched the video. Well, we do that through the safety system, and we do it as an acknowledgement or as a read and sign, so that way, even the individuals in marketing and finance and that may not have another reason to get in there are getting in there. It's the same thing with kind of the flight risk piece, right? If a pilot knows how to go file a report because he has to go past it every day, to look at his friend. So
Yeah.
he knows where all of the information is. So just taking the information and putting as much of it into the system as you can, so that, still safety related information, but so that folks, I don't want to say are forced to log in, but you're putting that information into the system and they have to log in to access it, which at least gives them a passing familiarization, because I don't expect, our marketing coordinator to log into our safety system every day. That would be a little much, but they have to do it once a month to acknowledge the safety meeting, which also, again, they have to go past where do you submit a report. They poke around and they start looking around, and that's really kind of how we have to drive that forward. But consistent use of the system is a challenge in a new SMS to a mature SMS. It's just something you have to battle, and we found that that's a pretty solid way to combat it.
And I think back to the point earlier about setting the tone early and forming the culture. I mean, the more people need to go into their safety program for whatever it may be, whether it's the formal safety reporting or just reading watching the recorded session of a safety meeting. Again, it's another drip of safety information, safety culture theme that keeps it at their forefront, right? If they just get safety on day one and they don't hear anything from anybody about safety thereafter, well, of course, that's going to slide back in their consciousness, right? So that whole thing about maintaining your culture through all these things is really, I think, a positive. And again, that ties back to business continuity again. So it's all kind of related. Now, I love the comment about back of the napkin. Because again, when you think about complying with all the different standards, and particularly in the charter world, it's not just being ISBAO. There's a lot of other, charter related, like Wyvern and others, where you have to comply with them as well. Maybe let's talk a little bit about that. Start with you, Jim.
The technology needs to fit the program, and if it does, then we can provide the evidence of implementation. It's easier to show, and the impact that it has is a whole lot easier to validate. So as we came in through the upgrade and really helping to supply that data back to management, it was simply easier to show. So as we go through audits, or as the FAA has questions for us, as we're just doing, they'll come through and do surveillance with us, and it makes it a whole lot simpler to show compliance. And where we're doing it, we can go back to that internal evaluation program where we're doing what we said we would do, whether it's for them or whether it's for us. We can show that we're compliant in a much more ordered fashion than trying to scramble and pull together a bunch of different pieces of paper. It just helps to set the pace for that, for any type of review like that, and that makes things a whole lot more comfortable, for sure.
Yeah. And organizing a stack of napkins is not very pleasurable either. Turn it over to you, Larry.
Definitely not.
Yeah. So the ability to comply is kind of one piece of it, right? It's easier to comply with standards and regulations with a technology solution in place, an SMS with a technology solution attached to it. But everybody, I would assume everybody that's out there watching and listening has been subject to an audit of some kind, or surveillance of some kind, and it's so much easier whether you're a safety director, safety manager, or you're in the operation. It is so much easier to have a system that houses this information, that you can reference information and not hunting through manuals over and over and over again, both from being able to kind of organize your internal evaluation and your gap analyses of these different standards, all the way to having your safety policies all in one, having your a couple of your key manuals all in one, so that when you're sitting down with the auditor, you don't have to leave the one system or two systems that are necessary to achieve to achieve what you need to with the audit. you're the last thing you want to do, the last thing I want to do, auditor or as an auditee, is to go here and go here and go here. It makes it disjointed. It makes the audit go smoothly. So audits are usually not fun to begin with. So when you're going through them, making them easier, making them more streamlined, improves the quality of life of the auditor and the auditee for those of us that have been on both sides of that table.
Exactly. Yeah, great points. Yeah, and again, I mean, if you're trying to convince management to give you the resources to go forward with the technology, you can always ask the question, well, why don't we do our scheduling on a chalkboard, right? I mean, it's just unrealistic to do scheduling not in a system. In the same way, you can do safety on a chalkboard or on the back of a napkin, as Larry says. It's just not very effective in the long term. So let's move on to the business side of things, because again, many of you on the call here are trying to expand or put in place your safety program. So let's talk a little bit about how you can tell your management team kind of the broader business things that they might be focused on. Let's start again with Jim. Let's talk about how you promote safety as part of your business paradigm.
So definitely when it comes to business promotion or our charter side of the charter department within the business, they have a fantastic opportunity to promote how we operate simply through the safety system. So the connection made through other outside vendors, whether it be through an audit, those connections could be made really quite quickly. Whether it's a reference to the safety management system that we're using, or whether it's through the provision of an audit or recent audit and discussing that, or what that audit partner provides to be able to peer into our organization. The charter department can use that and increase their network. It starts to beg the question of what's going on and who's your safety director, who's your director of operations, and we start to have additional communications. Well, when you have that conversation, those additional conversations amongst the partners and the management teammates, and it's not just the pilots showing up for some supplemental lift, but the whole team shows up. That's where that warm and fuzzy comes in. So it's that whole network. When safety is shared throughout the entire company, and everybody knows about it, how it works, and what part they play in it, it's second nature for them to be able to promote the company, to touch on safety, and to be able to hand that, oh, you've got a question about that? I can hand you right off. I know right where you need to get that answered. And it doesn't matter who within the department, but it really does work to help tie all of those departments together for the purpose of promotion within and without.
Excellent. Larry?
Having an SMS allows us to, using the principles of an SMS, allow us to talk with our customers about how we're safe, right? Safety professionals are known to want to sit down and talk safety. So if I ever have a client that asks me how we keep them safe, I'll talk about it until they're tired. So it gives us the ability to talk about how we're safe, not just that we're safe, right? We actually do marketing campaigns. I do a newsletter of sorts every quarter that go out to all of our clients, and we talk about some of the different safety principles. What is safety assurance? How does it affect you as a customer, right? And really just kind of get into that discussion. Jim mentioned it. The warm and fuzzy comes not with the hey, you keep me safe, but knowing that there's a little bit of science to it, right? We're not just taking off. Hope isn't a strategy, right? So we're actually, kind of again peeling back that curtain just a little bit and talking about some of the things that we do to keep our passengers safe. It's been a huge impact for us to be able to have that club in the bag to be able to discuss that directly with customers. And again, us safety folks are always glad to do it. So it works out really well from a promotional standpoint.
Yeah, excellent. And then, of course, when you're talking to management, there's costs associated to put in place a program. And one of the things you're always going to want to hear is, what's the ROI on this safety thing, right? So let's talk a little bit about financial benefits. We'll start with you, Jim.
So I went for the statement here. You can't prove a negative, and it can be hard to justify some of your recommendations some days. When you start to look back at where safety wasn't applied, where there was an opportunity to capture an event, and most events start to play out that way. As we read through investigations, it's like, gosh, there was opportunities to capture this event. So while we might not be able to apply directly where we're making the company money, we can apply indirectly where we're definitely saving the company money by looking back at those past statistics, and where we've shown improvement on those same areas of statistics. So all of that data that we're tracking, we can say, hey, look, where you see this, safety is definitely having an impact on actually keeping us safe. You can't just say, I think one of you said it a little bit earlier, we're not just safe because we haven't had an accident. We're safe because of all of these positive capacities that we operate in. And so that's one aspect and one approach for management to be able to show that there's a financial benefit here. And of course, there's others.
Right. Excellent. Larry?
Yeah, Jim, you hit the nail on the head. From a cost perspective, it's hard, right? Safety initiatives are sometimes can be, in some organizations hard to kind of to get that across the finish line, because the ROI is hard to see, as Steve mentioned. But you nailed it with we're not making you money, but we can save you money, and turning that into using. Not only are we saving money on the safety side, but again, and I mentioned this earlier in the presentation, we have the ability to use our as a management system for the entire organization. Most organizations I worked at use it for things like brand impact. We use it for things like financial impact. How does this decision that has no safety bearing whatsoever, has no bearing on the safety of our passengers necessarily, but the same principles apply, the same risk management principles that you apply in the financial world at a basic level apply in the safety world. So take the safety framework you have. Again, we don't necessarily have these full-blown ERMs built. Take that, the SMS, and use it as your ERM. We actually we had some cybersecurity concerns that had come up, and they were reported through a safety report, and we've avoided financial loss from that. Is it a safety concern? No, there was no real safety concern for our passengers or for our aircraft or our employees, but there was the business had a risk associated with it. And if you apply those SMS principles, and this is my favorite thing to talk to leadership about, because it's the easiest thing to connect. It's the great equalizer, right? When you have somebody who doesn't necessarily want to buy into the safety part of safety management from the standpoint that it's just not connecting, this connects with them, right? You take it and you use it for everything else, and you can avoid loss, you can increase revenue, you can increase your customer service that you're providing to your passengers. If the safety doesn't speak to them, the rest of that can. And it's a really good way to get a foot in the door with SMS. And then, oh, by the way, once you get your foot in the door with the system and getting it stood up and working, everything else kind of flows with it, right? Folks will come along once they realize the benefits once or twice. They just need to realize it in their world and in their way.
Right. Yeah, that's the key. And I think once you do that, then you probably get a lot more support than you need, which is good. So let's talk again from a business standpoint, the supply chain side of things, partner supply chains. Jim, you get some great stuff here, particularly in the COVID example.
Yeah, I went right to that. Of course, we opened the door to this one early on, so we'll kind of touch on it again here. When it came to our partners, one big example throughout the 2020-2021 experience was COVID. What are your policies? What are your procedures? What products are you using? How are they working? What's the availability of it? And can we use that to reinforce customer and vendor confidence, whether it be for our customers or whether it be with our vendors or whether it be as a vendor? So, what were we doing as a whole throughout some of these organizational or network meetings? So we collaborated quite often on, what do we do for ensuring safe hotel space? What do we do for ensuring that tiny space where we're transporting passengers along with a flight crew from one spot to another to keep that space safe? And there was a lot of hokey products out there. And there was a lot of things that we knew did work, but were hard to find. So some of that network within the safety community was a spot that we could connect with and to communicate on, and then through our own and from without, through that safety management process, the risk management and the safety assurance process, it was, hey, this product is working, or that product is not, or this policy is working, this procedure is not. So those were great ways to collectively obtain input, analyze the data, and then weigh it against our own from one partner to the next.
Right. That's good. That's, again, broad community, right? Larry?
First, on what Jim said, just real quick, as an SMS matures, and even when you're first starting out, having, I'm going to use the term Rolodex, even though I don't know why we still use that term, but the term Rolodex, having folks that you can rely on. I had never met Jim before we'd done this, and forums like this are a really good way to do it. But just building that network of people, right? The collective kind of being stronger than the individual. We're all capable, smart individuals, but we've all faced different challenges and things, and being able to have those discussions with vendors, also with colleagues within the industry, is huge. I just wanted to kind of throw that out there for those of you that are starting the journey. Build those contacts, build that network, because it's invaluable when you need it. For us, it really gives us SMS gives us a standard that we measure others with, right? We talk a lot about the Omni standard and what that standard is, and our expectation is that anybody that we're doing business with is going to meet that standard. From a safety standpoint, from a cultural standpoint, how they fit standpoint, we have that expectation. So, the SMS allows us to have that template, right? Just not necessarily just from a blocking and tackling audit perspective, right? Do they check these boxes? Do they have a drug and alcohol program? Yes, check mark. But how they fit in with how Omni does business, right? And how we want to operate, how we want to put forth, the presentation that we want to give to our passengers, the efficiency that we pride ourselves on having. SMS, again, gives you that framework, and it gives you that cultural framework, not just the box checking auditing framework, but the kind of cultural standards driven framework that we have to make sure that the people that we're using to interact with our operation and our business meet the standard that we hold for ourselves.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it shouldn't matter who's doing the work, as long as it's done the same way by all, right? Well, I do want to get through the parting thoughts so we can get some questions from the audience. So real quick, just to kind of wrap up some of the main themes of the things that we've touched on today. The first one that jumps off the page is that SMS is just another form of business process improvement. So as you're talking to your leadership about getting resources for your safety program, put it in that light, because again, if management isn't very familiar with safety, the fact that they can understand business process improvement is essentially one and the same. And that might help you get a little bit more attention, or to Larry's point earlier, putting it in their language. The second thing is when you have an SMS, you can demonstrate a safe operation, not just talk about it. Oftentimes people say, well, we have a safe operation and we have a lot of seasoned people and so forth. But if you can't really prove it, if you don't really have a way to objectively demonstrate that, it's like, I think it was Larry earlier who said hope. You can't just hope it goes well, right? You want to know that it at least have a high likelihood of going well. So a system really helps facilitate that aspect. I think we've certainly hit on this theme quite a bit today, that the safety program extends well beyond your internal operation. So as you came on today's call and you've certainly seen a lot of presentations about SMS, and we've kind of in a funnel thought about it more or less just from an internal perspective. Hopefully there's been a lot of food for thought today about the impacts it can have beyond just your internal employee team. And then the back of the napkin concept, right? There's a lot of data that you can have in your safety program. And technology can really just help you organize and manage that in a different way to really, ultimately bubble out the key insights you need to manage the operation by. Yes, you can do it on the back of a napkin, but it's hard to see trends and such when you're stacking napkins. And then last but not least, the whole theme of what we're talking about here is, it's not just about being compliant, right? I think every one of us on the call today who's a safety professional, gets out of bed wanting to be as safe as possible, right? That's the objective. So when you have a program like an SMS and you have technology helping you do it every day, and you have great training and communication like Larry and Jim have articulated, then you're really putting yourself in a best position to be able to do that and then leverage that as a business. So I think with that, turn it back over to you, Catherine, to see if there's any questions from the audience.
All right. Yes, we do have a couple, and I just want to say, wow, what a fantastic discussion of practical information about how to SMS, right? From the day one, the indoctrination, making that how you frame your operation, and even before that, starting at the hiring interviews, explaining to your management the benefits of this, to socializing, to building in technology to make it easy, getting people to log in, all the way out to your external entities, the vendors you work with. This whole trajectory just in this conversation today has been just great sort of practical tips and tricks and things to think about. So thank you so much for that. One of the questions here is, what's the biggest lesson learned from your operations over the past year, going from the COVID sort of slower time to now with demand being on the rise?
Larry or Jim?
Yeah, I mean,
I'll
that's
hop
a.
in. I'll
Yeah,
hop
go
in
ahead.
and do my best. I think the biggest lesson learned is that having and I'm going to tie this back to an SMS. I'm sorry, it's ingrained, but it helped us into COVID and it helped us out of COVID, right? So having things in place where we can, analyze the different things going on both in the business market and also the labor market, which I know, everybody is kind of still in that musical chairs game. We used our SMS to get into COVID and manage COVID as it was going on. And then coming out of the back end, how do we manage getting back to normal operations? I know that sounds silly. We should just be able to flip a switch and go, finally. But there are so many different things, from making sure properly, where you have enough people to handle the demand. Do you have enough airplanes to handle the demand? Do you have all of these things in place coming out of COVID? And using an SMS to kind of, lift you up coming out of COVID, just like we did going into it, was super, super important for us.
I can't help but echo the idea that the biggest lesson learned was that having an SMS made it manageable, and without it, I can't imagine the potential for chaos within the organization, just to manage all of the data that came at us from that whole situation. And then as things started to open up and demand increased, all of the questions that arose of how are we going to deal with this from within our own organization? How do we spool up safely? And we answered questions of currency for pilots as they started to get rolling again. We answered questions of currency for pilots from outside the organization. All of that, by having the SMS in place, by having that network in place, we as we looked back on that whole situation, yes, you moved from normal operation to, I don't want to call it an emergency tempo, because it certainly was not just one emergency. There were multiple different instances within all of that. So yeah, to say that yes, having an SMS was of great help was one of the biggest lessons learned.
Wow, that is that's a really reassuring comment that it gave you the framework and all the things you talked about today fit in that sort of journey through these last couple of years. Another question here: with the impending FAA SMS mandate, can you touch on the way in which a mandate helps or supplements the company's self-imposed strategy to roll out an SMS?
I think one of the things that strikes me. Go ahead, Larry.
No, you're good. Go ahead, Jim. Sorry. It's hard. I'm also on my phone talking, so there's a little bit of a delay, so I apologize.
Yeah, that's all right. I think for me, one of the things that I have a little bit of hope in is that one of the really positive aspect of an external audit gives us an avenue to take a first look at another vendor, and if they are in line with some of the same criteria that we keep in line with, and we know where that baseline is, then we know we've got a good start on looking at another operator to help provide supplemental lift for us. The SMS through the FAA, my hope is that it will provide that same level of transparency from one operator to the next, to be able to say, yes, this is an operator that we could do business with, and then to start that conversation. Just another avenue for that, and I'm kind of looking forward to it because it'll help broaden that out and make some of that work that we do on the back side of safety management hopefully a little bit easier.
Awesome. Larry?
Yeah, I think that the mandate, or the potential of a mandate, it's daunting. I was actually at the airlines not when the NPRM for 121s occurred, but when the compliance date occurred, and we were thankfully pretty well ahead of the game. I think that, again, the framework is out there, right? Where I think it helps is if you get ahead of it and you start sooner rather than later, right? And not try to start kind of the validation process when it's getting close to those, those different gates that they put in place and say, okay, you have to have, submitted X by Y date, and getting ahead of it and starting now, because once that NPRM happens and once the rule is actually in place, I'm presuming it's going to be a lot like it's going to be Part 5, and there may be some caveats and carve-outs for 135 in there, but Part 5 gives you what you need to have an SMS. There is the ICAO SMM, there's the different standards, SBAO, Wyvern, so on and so forth that we've discussed. The framework is there, the information is there, and if you need to start in a notebook or a back of a napkin just to get it off the ground and start embedding those principles, do it, and do it tomorrow, because once that mandate happens, it's going to be, there's a lot of us in the United States, so there's going to be kind of a mad dash to get to the end. And this is whether or not you choose to participate in the FAA's voluntary program in the meantime. You can put everything in place and start standing up some of these principles 1, 2 at a time, and get ahead of it using the documentation that the FAA has already provided, because I don't imagine, this is anecdotal and it's my opinion only, but I don't think it's going to depart too much from Part 5, which is already out there and being used by the airlines. So the best advice I can give is to start today.
I think if I could piggyback on that, Catherine, I think one thing for everyone on the phone to be aware of is that a standard tells you what you need to do, but it doesn't tell you how you need to go about it. So you probably all have very good safety things going on at your organization. So to the extent a lot of those things that you do probably help comply with a lot of the things that the standard wants you to be able to demonstrate. So if you then take a lot of those good practices and then you start to codify it in the context of an SMS, to Larry's point, you can get a start on that without flipping your organization on its head. You probably have a lot of the ingredients you can get started with, again, as you said, sooner than later.
That's great. Fantastic information. And I also liked how you noted that the SMS as a tool to check consistencies with your vendors, with your external entities, whether it's supplemental lift or whoever you're working with. All right. So with that, I guess, is there it's one last question here. Talking about supplemental lift and external vendors, does this how does the difference in requirements between Part 91 ops versus other charter operators who need supplemental, do you need to make changes depending on whether it's 91 or 135, or is that all part of the process of the SMS that you have, the framework that you've already talked about?
I'm trying to reread through my notes. You know, some operators have expectations. So if you've got a Part 91 operator that's looking for supplemental lift, do we meet their needs? And so having the SMS in place, having those audits in place, having avenues to be able to supply that information to say that we meet their needs, or is there a change? You know, is there a change that's needed? When we look at Part 91 operators, and I might be going down, you know, down a little bit of a side path, but when we compare our Part 91 partners and what they're looking for from us when it comes to safety, when it comes to supplying a flight crew, when it comes to supplying maintenance in support of their aircraft, and we begin to expand on and explain all of that. Generally, we can meet their needs, but the SMS system, having that system in place, gives an opportunity when they have a baseline and say, we need you to meet this particular baseline. When you don't, of course, the pilot, to reference the pilot shortage, when you have one pilot that's perhaps not meeting their baseline needs, it opens up the opportunity to have that discussion about why does the pilot that doesn't meet your baseline needs still meet your needs for safety. So the SMS that is in place provides all of that other data to help create the reassurance to show that pilot is trained, that they've gone through all of the appropriate checks, and perhaps even that they are, due to the imbalance, that they're placed with a pilot that is that's going to help to balance that out, someone that's far more experienced in the aircraft. When it comes to the maintenance side of things, being able to show that that we have trained personnel for that aircraft, as opposed to just referencing a manual for that 91 versus 135 upkeep.
Right.
Where can we fill in some of those gaps? I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that's great. As it provides the framework for the discussion for things that come up. I think it makes me think back to what you were talking about with the lesson learned of the SMS gives you a way to make those discussions manageable and direct them. Larry, any thoughts?
No, that was a really good way to put it. I do think that kind of additionally, it goes back to the ease of meeting standards. For those of us that provide 135 supplemental lift, we're all kind of singing from the same hymnal to a degree, right? Because we're all adhering to the same standards largely. So if you have an SMS that stood up and you're adhering to the the kind of intent and letter of those standards, then it makes that discussion it makes that discussion easier with whomever you're providing supplemental lift for, because if I'm entrusting somebody with my clients, I want to know that they know how to analyze risk and that they have a process with which to do that. And again, when we're all using the same standards, having an SMS that meets those standards makes that discussion much quicker, and it makes it much easier to show compliance with those standards, and to, as Jim mentioned, if there are any gaps, you can have those discussions, because again, Steve mentioned it's a standard. It provides you the what, it doesn't provide you the how. So I may do it differently than the vendor I'm providing lift for, but I can have that discussion and show them how I meet both the intent and the letter of what they're trying to convey much easier with an SMS versus kind of having to coddle together an answer to their question or an answer to their concern from 6 or 7 different manuals. And we do this here, we do this here, we do this here, we do this here. The SMS kind of consolidates that information and makes that discussion much more streamlined and much easier.
Fantastic. Wow, thank you. What a great session today. Before I close this out, Steve, do you have any closing thoughts?
No, I appreciate Jim and Larry contributing, their feedback on these topics. Both of these guys and their organizations are best in the business, so it's great to be able to have them participating. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Steve, Jim, Larry. This was fantastic. There will be a recording available of this on the IBAC website, and also I put links to the next 2 sessions presented by Polaris Aero for these SafetyNet webinars, and both Polaris and IBAC will be at the NBAA's base conference next week in Orlando, so please stop by and say hello. I can't say thank you enough for the really practical information that you guys have given us today, and I will look forward to talking with you guys all again soon. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and have a great rest of your day. Hope to see you next week in Florida.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye. Thank you.